I'm a disturbed person. If you ask my friends, they'll tell you just how disturbed I am, but there are some particular things that disturb me. Two of the very big things that disturb me are how people treat each other and how people treat the planet, and thinking that human beings are, justified in taking and doing anything that they want to do. And this is a problem that we need to solve, and it's not obvious how you might go about solving it, but there are those who've approached the problem. Calvin and Hobbes have a particularly good idea. And they say if people sat outside and looked at the stars more each night, I bet they'd live a lot differently. And I would agree with that. I'm an astronomer, astrophysicist. This is a view from my backyard, just looking right outside there. And I look at things very differently because I'm an astronomer. And I look at things and I understand just where we fit in. I realize that that little blurry thing over there that you can see with your naked eye if you go out and know where to look, that's the Andromeda Galaxy. It takes 2.8 million years for that light to reach you. And that little blurry thing is 300 billion stars. And there are 500 billion of those out there. And what we now know about stars is that most stars have planets. So take 300 billion times 500 billion times, a handful, and you might decide that maybe this isn't the only place in the universe that's unique, that there are all these other things that are out there. Now the trick is, how can you actually engage people with this in a significant way? So, little piece of history here. 2009 was a very big year for us. 2009 was the International Year of Astronomy, dedicated by the United Nations, ascribed to by many countries around the world. And 2009, because it was the 400th anniversary of Galileo's great discoveries. And that certainly was kind of the first big push to put us, from the center of everything out to the edge. And those included finding out that Jupiter had moons, and those moons went around Jupiter, so the sun and the Earth, everything wasn't just the center. Everything could be a center. Finding out that there were craters on the moon and sunspots. These were very, very big deal things. So for the International Year of Astronomy, there were a series of programs that were operated around the world to bring astronomy to people. There were teacher training programs. There were programs on women in astronomy. There were programs on astronomy art. If you've gone to some of the major airports in the country, you'll see these big displays of great astronomy photographs. Those were actually part of the International Year of Astronomy. They're still in Terminal 3, I think, at O'Hare. When you go there, you will see all of those. They're really, really very cool. Well, one of the ideas during the International Year of Astronomy was, well, that stuff's up there, people should look at it. So they came out with this idea for the Galileoscope. There should be an opportunity for people all over the world to see the sky. Now, keep in mind what all over the world means. This means that we have to deal not just with rich Western countries like Germany, Norway, the United States, Canada, but we're also talking about Eastern Europe, South America, Africa, South Asia, and so on. So there's a lot of constraints that you'll see that came up in the project. So my involvement in the project began when I bumped into this fine gentleman, Rick Feinberg, at a meeting of the American Astronomical Society. This was before the International Year, and they're talking about this project and what they could do. And I started, bullying with them, like, oh, we could make this, we could do that, and so on. And I have an interesting background. I've worked in a lot of different fields. I did a lot of work in economic development, so I know a lot of manufacturers and distributors and all these different things. And they said, oh, you're perfect. Would you like to help? And I said yes. That's another aspect of my being a disturbed person. And so we began the project. So the first thing we did was we said, okay, well, let's find all the inexpensive telescope samples that we can get. What would be out there that we can buy lots of and distribute to places? And we discovered some interesting things. We collected samples. I had an entire lab full of samples, hundreds of samples out there. So let me tell you what happens with telescopes. You have a few options. One option is you can buy a good telescope. This is a TeleVue 85. It's a terrific telescope, and for a mere $2,900, you can have one, plus eyepieces and everything else. And so if you get a very good telescope, it costs money. Now, that's not what we're aiming for. We're looking for something very inexpensive so we could distribute it. So you end up with very inexpensive telescopes, which are these store-bought telescopes. And you've seen many of these. And this is how it goes. Some group buys this telescope, gives it to a kid for Christmas. Kid tries to use it, doesn't work very well, goes into a closet. comes out of closet, goes into yard sale, is bought by other unsuspecting family that gives it to their kid for Christmas. It doesn't work very well. It goes into a closet. I think you get the pattern here. The net result being this. A very unhappy experience. Now, the thing is, if you're trying to get people excited about doing something, you want to give them a good experience. You want them to come out of it wanting more. What we refer to the Galileoscope project is we wanted it to be the entry drug to astronomy, right? We want this, and then you want to go further along. And so we realized that there was no product out there that did what we wanted it to do. You could find good, or you could find cheap, but you couldn't find good and cheap. So that meant we had to go and develop our own. And luckily, most of us who are involved in this are educators. I'm a professor at a college, amateur astronomers, professional astronomers, optical designers, and we put together what we thought would be the greatest telescope out there. And let me tell you about this thing, because it's actually very, very cool. Firstly, it's a kit. It's something you actually have to put together. So in the process of getting it, you learn how a telescope works. You learn where the optics go, what actually goes into it, as opposed to getting this finished thing, which is a black box with images that show up. So you actually can learn what it's like. We wanted it to be very durable. This is going to be an educational product. They're going to go into classrooms. They're going to be put together, taken apart, put together, taken apart, put together, taken apart. So it couldn't be glued. It couldn't have anything that snapped together, because you know what happens when you snap something together, you take it apart, it never snaps together again. So we couldn't use that. Many, many features to make it usable in those ways. We need to make it easy to manufacture. So there's another interesting thing. There's something called design for manufacture. So you're used to optics usually having a set screw to hold an eyepiece in place. Well, it takes an extra about 5 seconds in the manufacturing process to put in the part to put in threads. Saying, what's 5 seconds until you make 1 million units? Multiply 5 seconds times 1 million units becomes a problem. It needed to be inexpensive, so you've had a feature that's a nickel. Well, a nickel times 1 million units, well, there's 50 grand. So you have to think very, very hard about how you do that. We wanted it to fit onto a tripod, so it would be very easy to put it onto something stable. We wanted it easy to point, so we wanted sights on it. And one of the coolest features is if you go to inexpensive telescopes, they come with a standard eyepiece, and you use that, and then you're done. We built this one to take the industry standard 1.25" tail. So you can put any accessory that you can buy for any telescope, even a TeleVue 85, will fit on this. So that's part of why we make it the entry drug. You can start with this. You could add eyepieces. You can add cameras. You can do all sorts of really, really cool things with it. So we came up with this design. It's really, really very cool. And then you have to start making them. And the first thing you need to do is make tooling so that you can punch out all the parts. And tooling costs money. Now, one of the first and early challenges. We started this in 2008, the beginning of the financial crisis. And there were supposed to be all sorts of international industrial sponsors that were going to be pouring money into doing this and making it happen, and it all dried up. We got precisely $0. But Rick and I felt this was a very important project, so we put the money in to make it happen. So each of us has a house a piece of money to make this thing go. So we were able to make tooling and get things started. So tooling gets made, parts start getting made, and lo and behold, there's the product. And there's one here, and there's one on a tripod over there that you can look at during intermission. One of the other interesting things, and I can teach you all about this because I teach entrepreneurship, is a product is more than just the physical thing. You also have to make the tooling to make the packaging. You have to print things. You have to put the right codes on things. You have to develop the instructions. We have instructions in 19 languages, including Urdu. I had never heard of Urdu until we had instructions in Urdu. You have to have spare parts. You have to have all sorts of things that go into it. So we've produced this. And there's Rick holding a Galileoscope in Padua, Italy, in front of Galileo's telescope. That is actually Galileo's telescope right there, which is really very, very cool. It's a good telescope. These are pictures taken through a Galileoscope. If you want to get people excited about astronomy, you have to see really cool things. There is one cool thing above all other cool things, and that's Saturn. Saturn is the sexiest thing in the universe. I do public astronomy programs. You can show people 153 things, and number 72 was Saturn. At the end of the night, you say, what did you see? And they go, Saturn. And there it is. And you can actually see Saturn's rings. People look, they see it, and they go, is that painted on someplace? No, that really is out there. And lo and behold, firstly, you can reproduce everything Galileo did. You can see the moons of Jupiter. You can see the bands on Jupiter. You can see sunspots. craters on the moon, and you can see Saturn as well. But you can see a lot more, in large part because the optics in what we put in here are infinitely better than anything Galileo actually ever had. His optics were actually terrible. As a matter of fact, we build into this an adapter that lets you put in the kind of eyepiece that he had, so you can see how incredibly difficult it was for him to get the observations that he did. So you can learn astronomy history while you're doing this as well. And so trucks full of these things get made and get transported. Through the work I did, I was able to know intermodal transportation companies. So they go by truck to a pier, by ship, by rail, and so on. For the international year, we operated warehouses around the world and started distributing these all over the place. How did we get them out there? Well, they were available for direct sale. People could buy them. A number of educational organizations around the world bought big blocks and distributed them to schools. But two of the major things that we were doing are donation programs. One is the Telescopes for Teachers program, where you can donate money and designate the school or teacher that's going to get them. And we can send them out by individually or preferably by the case of 6. They're normally packaged in cases of 6. The other thing we've done is obtain sponsorship from many organizations, and they provide the funding to be able to put up custom branded versions of Galileoscopes that are then distributed to schools. We just did another batch this past year. 10,000 of these went out to teachers. We just put out a note that says, you can get a telescope, just pay for the shipping, sign up here. 10,000 went out in under 24 hours. So there's a tremendous interest in science education, but teachers don't have the resources. So if we provide a good tool, they're interested in having that. During the International Year of Astronomy, we ran a buy one, give one program where 7,000 of them were sent to South Africa for distribution through countries in Africa that couldn't afford them. And we've done reasonably well. 250,000 of them are now in use in 110 countries. And it's more than 110 countries because we're not actually sure all the countries that got those donated scopes throughout Africa. So over 110 countries are now using over 250,000 of these. And a lot of great workshops have been done. Various people have now created tools and lesson plans and observing guides, all of which are available for free to be able to use Galileoscopes for doing science education. This is a workshop being done for teachers in Hawaii. This gentleman here is Dan Lyons, actually a former student of mine who then went to graduate school at the University of Wyoming, PhD now, and he does these workshops. And these are teachers learning how to put Galileoscopes together in their classrooms. This is one of the workshops that's been developed, Galileo's Classroom. It's a whole book you can download with the history, instructions, lesson plans, cool things that you can do with it. Claude Ruel here runs a program called Telescopes for Tanzania. And he takes batches of these to Tanzania, takes them out to villages, and everybody is thrilled when they can walk away with an actual working telescope. This is a workshop that's being done in Hawaii, this is being done in Arizona, and this is in Chile. So there are programs being done around the world to get people connected and to learn how to put them together. There was a group that put a chunk of money together, bought a whole batch of these, distributed them throughout Jamaica. And I actually just found out about this. This was done years ago. There are so many of these programs, it's hard to keep up with everything that's been done. One thing that's very, very cool, if you do a Google Images search for Galileoscope, you'll come up with pictures of kids all over the world doing this. It's really, really very, very exciting. Homeschoolers. There are homeschool groups that purchase blocks, and we're able to distribute them to homeschoolers, because they're not part of the regular education system that can get them through their education departments, but rather acquire them and distribute them and put them to use. You may not know it, but this is another international year. This is the International Year of Light. And Galileoscope is, again, an international cornerstone project for the International Year of Light. And it's through that those 10,000 telescopes went out to teachers. We're still looking to get as many sponsors as we can to put as many of these out there. One of the reasons we're able to do this and distribute them so inexpensively is because Rick and I not only don't get paid, we're actually in debt, putting the money in to make it happen. We don't advertise, we don't have offices, we don't produce multiple products. So we're able to put these out. By the case of 6, they're 25 bucks a piece. And I don't think you can find a better thing at that price. And that's our cost. That's what it costs us to run the company and put out the products. This is the environment you live in. That's all light pollution. That's all wasted energy, and it's taking away the sky from everybody. That sky that you saw at the beginning from Twin Mountain, that's something that 70% of the world doesn't get to see. As a matter of fact, I can tell you that as dark as the sky is here, it's not as dark as it was when I was in college, and it's certainly not as dark as it was when I was a kid. And economic development is great, but we can do it in a way that uses energy more wisely. That's us. That's what we get to play with. That's the Earth from space. I think if we get more people looking at space and understanding what's really up there, where we really fit, that maybe they would treat this place a little bit better. So thank you very much.